You are tired of average. You want more out of life. You know you're capable of something greater. This show will help you become resilient in your home, at work, and in your community. Welcome to the Resilient Humans Podcast with your host, Kevin Wood. Welcome back to the Resilient Humans Podcast, and we're joined by Dr. Kathy Campbell, a trailblazing pharmacist with over 30 years of experience who's redefining what it means to support health and wellness. As the author of Obesity, the Modern Famine, Dr. Campbell combines traditional pharmacy with functional medicine to tackle the root causes of chronic health issues. Her personal journey has inspired her to help others take control of their health, going through personalized coaching and lifestyle changes. I want you to get ready to learn from her expertise as a wellness innovator and hear her insights into the future of healthcare. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really a privilege to be here.
We were talking just before hitting record, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation because we're both in the health and fitness realm, wanting to create more resilient humans, and we're just kind of tackling it at different angles. So it feels like we are on the same team, and it's going to be exciting to see where this conversation goes.
Sure, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Now, I understand that you just got back from teaching in Africa. Mm-hmm. Tell us what that experience was like for you.
Well, I'm a clinical community pharmacist, and I've been helping patients not need medications intentionally for about the last 15 years. And that's a real innovative point of view in the pharmacy profession. But being an independent small pharmacy with my own practice, I get to still work for the patient directly. I don't have a lot of layers in between. And I've been trying to educate and mentor my profession to move forward into that. So my trip to Africa was really a continuing education opportunity to really immerse my fellow pharmacists into a real immersive food as medicine and how to help patients not need medications as a proactive strategy instead of the reactive healthcare strategy that we have. The independent community pharmacist is a very unique cornerstone of healthcare that we're kind of at the crossroads. It's going to have to evolve or it's going to go away. And I say that being that place where people go to be well and navigate not only health, but disease and have a really trusted resource, I think the community pharmacist is ideally suited for that. So my trip to Africa was about that. Plus, Africa is an amazing space of nature and people, right? The community is unbelievable. The amount of love and care that is just woven into their society still is palpable on the impact of health, and the amount of food that is unadulterated was just amazing. So it was really great to have that immersive experience and lead my peers through that conversation.
That's a cool experience.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. You mentioned the word wellness. How do you describe that in your own words?
Yeah, I call myself a wellness pharmacist. And what that is assisting patients in a proactive, intentional way to manage their physiology and well-being proactively. So wellness is an intentionality of doing something to stay well. Now, you graciously introduced me in the functional medicine space, and I've been studying functional medicine for 2 decades, and many have called me one of the first functional pharmacists. But what I do, I don't even call functional medicine. I call it foundational health because we're just missing the basics. And as a chemistry expert, and the pharmacist is the chemistry expert in healthcare, we are the ones that are actually trained to manipulate metabolism with medications. I just recognized that nobody had good basic foundational biochemistry, right? And then as I looked, and what most people don't recognize is that medications only work as an adjunct to diet and exercise. And so because we have such a cultural chaos around diet and movement. We just lack both in the quantities our physiology evolved to need. That if I can help patients with that even a little bit, what I find is I don't need the next drug, or the drug that they are taking works better, or we can get them off of those medications. So it's a wellness to me is a proactive approach, and it's an intentional approach to optimize basic function such that we have the health we want to live that life we want.
You mentioned the phrase cultural chaos in our diet. What does that mean? Like I have an idea of what you're going to say, but let our listeners know what that means to you.
73% of the foods in the United States food system are ultra processed toxic waste. They should not even be able to be called food. They are so far away from the evolutionary chemistries that we actually consumed as we evolved, that they are not only deficient in what we need, they're toxic in the chemistry they introduce into our body. So when 3/4 of the food system will hurt you and have you live a less vital and shorter life, that is a cultural problem. And we also have been kind of trained to sit. And, humans evolved exerting as little energy as possible. So that is kind of our evolutionary nature. But it's gone to a point where we don't have enough movement to circulate oxygen. We don't have enough movement to create heat. So we're actually compromising with the lack of foundational nutrition and the lack of adequate movement. We're compromising our basic ability to make energy and ATP. And that's the chaos I mean. And that doesn't even include medications. That doesn't even include environmental toxins. That's just lacking what we need to have foundational function from a biochemical point of view.
So, you mentioned about movement as well. And I definitely see that. And I hear it quite often. People say, well, I'm in pain, so I don't move. Well, maybe you're in pain because you don't move. It's just a quick little shift of the perspective there that, I had somebody today literally say, hey, can you put my membership on hold? I hurt my shoulder. Well, what are you going to do? Are you just going to do nothing? Because doing nothing is definitely not going to help you recover quicker. So what's the point here? What are we doing? So.
Yeah, that is the fight or flight. I think the primitive brain kind of trying to take over and crawl under a rock. One of the biggest surprises I've found as I coach people to clean up these basic systems was the amount of pain caused by sugar. Agreed. And the amount of sugar in our diet, I'm convinced shunts to uric acid. And uric acid is what people might know in gout. But prior to gout, it's just a little acid crystal floating around our joints and causing an enormous amount of pain. So what's amazing is how much people feel better when they first alter that chemicals coming in from the diet, and then they just naturally feel like moving. And you may know this, it takes 13 atoms of oxygen to make one molecule of energy, of ATP. And the heart was never designed to be the only muscle that pumped blood around, right?
Correct.
Every other muscle delivered that critical oxygen. So as we become more sedentary, we just are more and more compromised in our basic energy production, and the body has to find a way to survive. And often that is curled up under a rock, barely breathing. And that's where a lot of our society feels like we are today.
It's true. I've always said motion is lotion. It literally helps with almost everything in your health and well-being is movement. And so we need to get more of it.
Well, and I think the more fun you have, the better. So I wish we did community dances again and everybody square danced. I wish we were bowling. I wish we were doing those kind of movements. And, gardening is way up there as a longevity movement. And so often people think it has to look like going to the gym. And the reality is, and the research says, no, it just has to be persistent and consistent.
Correct.
And don't stop. Like you said, that guy just, all right, what are we going to do? Are you going to walk in? Are you going to go swimming? What are you going to do to keep the movement going? Because he's going to heal faster.
Yeah.
Whenever that happens.
Some people are hard-headed, though. It's hard to get that message through a thick skull. So,
like I said, it's all survival. And when you're in pain, that's the biggest driver of chaos. Pain is a really hard thing to manage because the primitive brain takes over and says, fight or flight, let's curl up. I get it. I totally get it.
So could you tell our listeners a bit about your personal story? I've done a bit of research on you, so I knew kind of like what your childhood was like and how you, I guess, evolved from that.
Well, I tell people, I had a great childhood, but I was obese when nobody else was obese. So prior to like the 1960s, 1 in 10 Americans were considered obese, right? 10% roughly. And that was always my family. So I was 100 pounds at 5 years old in 1972. I was 200 pounds at 10. I was 275 when I graduated high school in the 80s. But more importantly, my grandfather weighed 350 pounds during the Great Depression. Okay. So I was in some ways incredibly fortunate because I was loved, accepted, and embraced in this big family without developing this psychological trauma of I should be somebody else, right? Which is often the case when shame and blame and manipulation is all part of that weight conversation. I was so fortunate to be fat and happy in a fat and happy family, right? But we tried, we worked on health. And I did a lot from the time I was 5. I mean, I'm still managing my weight. So it's still part of the management. But what I learned was what I was being told and what in good faith I was doing, low fat, low calories, diet sodas, were completely wrong for my genetics. Completely wrong. And at times when I was at my highest stress level and I knew my eating was consistent, my body would react to hold on to more weight. So in that journey, not only was I living and challenging and experimenting in that, I was also getting a few degrees in chemistry and science. And I was able to start questioning the research and start trying different things personally. And then I always learned from my patients. And they would say something, or we would experiment with something, or they would have effects, and we would just learn. So basically, what I have come to the, kind of synopsis is we are completely starved and as a society in what our body needs to function. Primarily, I mean, in the book, there's about 24 different things that I identified that we have a famine in. The basic nutrients of plant. There's over 26,000 chemicals in whole foods, not 100 vitamins, 26,000 chemicals in whole foods. So when you eat a really robust plant-based approach, plant-focused is what I call it, you are literally giving your body this smorgasbord of biochemistry with which to flex with and to adjust with and to respond with. But because that has not been part of our world for the last 60 years, it actually started when we started into agriculture about 12,000 years ago. We went from the hunter-gatherer diversity of nutrients to this more narrow. We just don't have enough to function at a mitochondrial level or throughout the system. And then the body is forced to triage. It's kind of forced to rob Peter to pay Paul. And that's where you start seeing compromises. And I know in my situation, when I was at my highest cognitive demand, I mean, I'm running 2 pharmacies. I got 2 babies. I've got a sick parent, and I'm working on a doctorate. My body's like, how are we going to do this on this small supply? And it will prioritize to cognition. The brain is a very energy demanding organ. And when you have high demand, it'll steal it from metabolism. It'll steal it from heat production. so that it'll keep you going. And my family, my biology, my genetics, and my family's were exquisite at surviving those situations, but it had me end up at 322 pounds too. So that's kind of what I have learned, is that it's way more complex than what we've been told. And our current culture is the environment that is perfect for producing the survival called obesity.
That brings up a lot of ideas or concepts that I've been exposed to over the years. One is the toxic environment. I remember showing a video. I used to teach health and wellness for high school students, and we watched a video that talked about that the environment that we're in is toxic, and it's creating or generating a lot of these problems that we're seeing today. And that was a video that was, almost 20 years ago. And we're seeing the effects of that now being like exasperated greatly.
Yeah.
The other idea or the concept that I'm looking to ask you about is why do our healthcare professionals not have a basic understanding of the things that we're talking about right now? And I'll give you an example. My mother went to her doctor. She has rheumatoid arthritis. She told him, when I eat sugar, I can't use my hands. When I don't eat sugar, I have full function. He goes, oh, I never heard about that before. I didn't think sugar had anything to do with that. Direct link to inflammation. Like, I know that, you know that. Why don't they know that?
They're not paid to know that, to be honest. I mean, there's some really misplaced incentives in our current healthcare system. $5 trillion is dedicated to our healthcare system, but it is locked up in the insurance model behind the diagnosis. Okay. So doctors are not trained to prevent, they are trained to diagnose and manage. Okay. So the more they diagnose and manage, the more incentivized the system is for them to continue doing that. There is no incentive to prevent the need for the diagnosis, because to get paid in our system, you have to have that diagnosis. That's a problem. And we know, here's more tragic, we know 75% of everything we're treating is preventable.
Mm-hmm.
But we spend 2% on actually preventing it, right? Well, to me, that's insane. And I've been a practicing pharmacist for 32 years. I have 4 generations of patients that I have had the profound privilege to love on and to be loved on and to connect and to help. I don't want them to be sick. I just like my mom get a call. I don't want her to be sick. I didn't want my patients who I've known longer than my mom to be sick. So it did not make sense to me to just stay on that mode when I knew, and I will say, informed from my own journey, that there was other biochemistry I could help them with, right? So what way I look at the patient, or the way I approach it, there's pharmacology, which is the interaction of chemicals in the body. And that could be poisons, toxins, medications, chemicals. Food pharmacology, which is the biochemistry from food on the body. But let me tell you, those two are easy compared to the last one, which is stress pharmacology, And a lot of people will see pain is a stress pharmacology, definitely psychological stress, financial stress, what I call mama trauma, being a parent stress. But let me tell you, the flip side of that is love, connection, purpose. Those biochemistries are profound in how they impact the body. And nobody's helping the patient really navigate that, let alone optimize it. And I always say, from my little pharmacy in the world, the most profound chemistry we have to impact health is first love and connection, and second food. And our system has gone from a system that used to help patients with that, a very relational healthcare system, to a transactional healthcare system where the insurance is in charge of it and they profit with each transaction. So there is not a lot of incentive financially for anybody to be in the relational space. And that's just a problem for me. And to be honest, for most independent pharmacists, because we still are loving on our communities. So I think it's a critical piece.
How are you providing that connection with people or encouraging them to develop connection in your own practice?
Well, I've always been very aggressive at when people walk into my pharmacy, I assume they want my help, right? So I am very assertive with giving them counsel. I do things like cooking demos, and I also do educational seminars. I also have private personalized coaching and counseling. I have programs that help them coach them through their issues. So if I have somebody that's very pre-diabetic or early diabetes and they want to reverse that, or they want to really manage some of that, we go in a coaching program to where I can really get to know them and they can get to know them. And you know this as a coach, what you know doesn't matter. It's what they know and what they do and what they're empowered to embrace. That's where the outcomes and the magic happens. But when that happens, it's like they can't unsee it again, you know? And so I offer myself and my talents for that. The other thing we do very aggressively is manage drug-induced nutrient deficiencies. 7 out of 10 Americans are on a pharmaceutical. People are putting more chemistry into their body than ever in the history of humanity, and they have no chemistry expert. And that's a wellness pharmacist. That's somebody to help them optimize those chemistries going in. I didn't trust my patients to the internet. I didn't trust them to the kid at the vitamin shop. So I started vetting supplements a long time ago, and I started vetting drugs and saying, I don't think this is the right one. We need to call the doctor and see what we can do to get this better optimized, because that is the pharmacist's expertise. I just was bold enough to create different business models around that.
Very cool. There's a lot of, and you mentioned a couple of these earlier, there's a lot of conflicting information out there when it comes to health, wellness, nutrition, foods, and whatnot. What's one piece of advice you'd give to somebody who feels overwhelmed by all of that conflicting health information?
Keep it simple. Plant and protein. Plant. I think I really think we're medicating a plant deficiency. I just think there is more, I think garlic has 2,300 different unique chemicals in it, right? And we look at a therapy like medical marijuana or CBD and all that. Those are plants. And the chemicals that are in that therapy are in broccoli. And they're in all these other plants, maybe in different concentrations. So the fact that people get results, I just think we are dealing with a profound lack of what the body needs to function that is provided in plant nutrients. Okay. And the reality is they don't show up in our culture. They don't. And the real crime is that from the 80s on, children have been groomed to think that what humans eat are nuggets and fries and the kids' meal. So to actually expect a child to eat a vegetable is almost heresy today, because you wouldn't have them just eat nuggets and fries. No. Why? Because that's going to groom them that that's what humans need to survive. And if you look at the generation from the 80s on, some of our biggest issues is those kids are now adults who want those bigger portions of fried chicken, pizza, and burgers, the kids' meals, right? And they're profoundly deficient. And I assert that obesity is a symptom of the deficiency, not the overeating. Now, I will say, when you're deficient at the cellular level, you have an incredible hunger. And that is like thirst. The mitochondria is sending a message to that brain saying, hey, we're dying down here. You need to go eat. Now, as a caveman, when that message went up to the brain, you grab the leaf, right? Because that's what was there. Today, we have like I said, 3/4 of what we can grab will kill you. And that perpetuates the problem. I love the word resilient in the title. And when I was doing a little bit of research in my book, the word resilience came up, and I took on this definition that said being able to access and utilize resources. Okay. That was it was like a definition in psychology. And I look at resilience of the cell. Does the cell have the resources to access and utilize? All the way up through the family, through the culture. But really, cellularly, we are incredibly deficient and we lack that cellular resilience. And when I help people kind of increase those reserves, it's amazing to me what happens to their foundational health.
So I have some nutrition background in precision nutrition, have my level 1, level 2. And one of the, we call them an anchor habit, is eating slowly. And I often coach my clients in that if all else fails, you throw everything else out the window, as long as you eat slowly, you will make progress. And the reason I tell them that is because when you eat slowly, you're going to chew more and you're going to be able to digest those micro and macronutrients more easily. Whereas when people eat fast, big chunks, they go through the system, they don't get absorbed, and then their body is actually craving more because they're not getting that absorption. Now, how have you ever, I guess, do you coach your clients or your people that come into the pharmacy on eating slowly and eating more mindfully, we'll say?
Yeah, definitely. But I think there's even a few steps before that. We're having trouble even accessing the nutrition, right? To even eat slowly. And the other piece of that is cooking. When you start prepping food, your brain literally starts creating digestive juices to prepare your body for the digestion. So absolutely on that side. But one of the things I look at is the quality of the gut. Is it able to digest? And then there's a massive amount of drugs that are complicating that. Many drugs that are over the counter that will have you not absorb nutrition. So it didn't matter if you ate it or ate it slowly or took a lot of supplements. Many people have a disrupted gut because of the medications or just because of the culture that they're in that will not optimize the absorption. So you're exactly right. There are so many pieces that can be altered and need to be looked at. But I think the first is the vegetables don't show up and the protein don't show up. Yeah. And so getting people to understand and actually look for those things, basically the 25% of the foods that aren't toxic in our society, to me, that's a big piece of the first step.
I find with a lot of, especially members of a gym, they're often concerned with supplements. And I call that majoring in the minors, or mowing the lawn when their house is on fire.
Right.
They're worried about all the little minutia, like, oh, should I mealtime and when should I eat my protein? Right. Just eat your protein. Let's just focus on that first. Right. Then we can start talking about meal timing and supplements and all the other stuff that's involved with it. So how do you deal with that? People that just want to, dive in or even do what's called an overhaul diet, where it's just, they want to change everything all at once, get overwhelmed, and then go back to their old habits.
Yeah. I mean, the other one that it kind of drives me a little crazy is the whole organic thing. Yeah. I mean, the fact that we have to pay more for non-poison food is a whole nother topic we could go off on. But many people get hung up there. And I'm like, and I ask when I teach food as medicine to my peers, I'm like, which one's better, a canned green bean, a frozen green bean, or an organically grown green bean? And I'm like, the answer is whichever one you can get into your patient. Right. And often I will anchor them and say, don't let great get in the way of good. We need to just clean up. And that's why I give them this really broad, I need you to eat plant and protein, plant and protein, plant and protein, plant and protein. And I kind of actually anchor that in their consciousness because I need to make it easy this has to be easy or it will not persist for the 30 years that I want it to persist. I've never been focused on weight loss, even though I've had to market that. I want a long and vital life. And having the nutrients and the biochemistry that supports the system for the long and vital life is not about weight loss. It's about metabolic optimization, actually, but nobody quite can hear that.
Yeah.
But as a pharmacist,
it's hard to sell a book with that title.
Yeah,
right?
I know. It's getting closer, but 15 years ago, they would have just laughed me off the stage. But that's from a pharmacist, chemist standpoint. That's really what I'm looking at. And so you got to keep it simple. And that's where I give people lists of non-starchy vegetables, lists of legumes, get them thinking about food again, not about points, not about calories. Calories is totally wrong. It's the chemistry, not the calories that count. And so when I get people to kind of quiet all that mess and bring it down to how many vegetables, what kind of vegetables, what are the recipes, how do we make it lovely, how do we enjoy it, how do we make it easy? Those are the things I anchor on.
I love that. That's a lot of, it resonates with how I coach as well. I have my clients come up with, we call them green light, yellow light, and red light foods. What are the green light foods? Things that support your health, things that digest easily, things that make you feel good after you eat them. And more often than not, it's exactly as you said, plants and proteins.
Plants and protein.
Those are the green lists. That's the green list, right? The red list, things that don't digest well. They make you feel icky after you eat a lot of them. Right. And it's not to say eliminate them entirely. It's to let's focus more on the green, less on the red, and you're going to see some drastic changes in a very short amount of time. How long do you feel it takes for people to notice a difference once they make those simple changes?
Well, I see differences in 2 weeks, right? And it really depends. Often I will, in my program, I will actually coach them really intently in the first 2 weeks and give them a cleanup protocol to clean up. I call it a cleanup phase. So often in those 2 weeks, for the first time, they're not bloated or they're sleeping better. And so they actually can see very quickly changes. And actually, it's interesting you say that. I think a critical component to keep them going is to help them hear their body working better, right? Or like I had a woman who, after our cleanup phase, she had gluten for the first time. And she sent us an email and said, every joint in my body hurts. Do I have to eat that? And we're like, no, that's brilliant that you noticed that and that you reached out and made a decision one way or the other. And so really a critical piece of this is to train people to have that attunement to what their body is telling them. And it's amazing how people don't correlate the chemistry coming in through food to their feeling and how they actually function. I think it's one of the issues with ADD and a lot of anxiety is reactive hypoglycemia, where the sugar just puts people on a roller coaster. But we're not calling it that. We're not looking at those correlations. And if we would, I think we would see profound improvements in a lot of neurobiology.
If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the healthcare industry, what would that be?
Boy, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a big one.
I'd probably get rid of some cartels that are running it.
Yeah.
I don't know. From my point of view, I would empower pharmacists and pharmacies, independent particular, to be health hubs and to be community health centers where we could have that personalized care and not just dispensers of medicine. So I am working to do that through education, but also through advocacy and some of those things. Because right now, people don't have a place in the medical system to be well or to get well. They're just going to go to the doctor and be given a medication, but that's not really any upstream management of why they're needing the medicine.
It's reactive in nature.
It's very reactive. That's exactly it. And I want a more proactive model. I also think nutrients are a big deal. And drug-induced problems are a big deal. I mean, I've lived through the opioid pandemic and crisis, But I think there's some crisis with the acid blocking drugs that maybe make that pale in comparison. Because when you eradicate acid from a stomach for decades, you're going to end up with these massive chronic diseases like dementia, osteoporosis, cancer, these sarcopenia, osteoporosis. So these somewhat benign acid blocking drugs, I think, are catastrophic. And nobody's helping people with that on the medication side. So I don't know if that answers the question. It's hard for one because there's so many places. It's incentivized the wrong place. Mm-hmm. But I do think the insurances are making too much money off of you being sick.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Who do you see as trying to find the word, partners or advocates that can help you in the message that you're trying to spread?
Oh, that's a great question. Definitely my peers in pharmacy. I think I'm getting a lot of psychologists and allied health practitioners, chiropractors who are saying, Kathy, we need your help, right? We need the pharmacist to help us engage. I mean, the new model of healthcare is the patient is in the center, right? The old model, the doctor was in the center. But the new model is the patient's in the center. The patient has an enormous amount of good information at their fingertips. The problem is they don't always know with context how it applies to them. So they need a team around them. They need a personal trainer. They need a physical therapist. They really need a chiropractor, a MD. They need a pharmacist if they're putting any chemistries in their body. And let me tell you, the supplements are a big chunk of that. We have a lot of livers that are being negatively impacted because of poor quality or toxic supplements, or just too many of them. We're just running all this stuff through our livers and the fructose and everything else, and it's not a good outcome. And so I think that team approach needs to happen. The problem is, the business model isn't quite there. So the health team with the patient in the center is the key. And I'm finding a lot of those allies that are asking for our support in their patients in getting them the health they want.
I see that as a major roadblock, especially on my side of things. I would love it if we could create, like you said, a hub or some type of center where it's holistic in nature, where you need this, you go here, you need this, you go here. Like, we're all working together for the same outcome. I find everybody's got these blinders on and they're just staying in their own lane, which makes it very challenging to get to a common outcome or a common solution. Any advice on opening up those avenues or possibilities of collaboration?
I think a lot of that stay in your lane is a financial power grab. We're all trying to support ourselves and support our teams and have financial responsibilities in doing that. And so often you end up trying to keep it all in-house. And I think that's going to have to change. I don't know how it's going to have to change. I think empowering the patient more with their financial decision-making will be part of it. Potentially going to employers. Employers are getting really sick of spending all their money on this system that's not producing health. And so I think the chief medical officer of the family, which is mom, and the employer are where we could potentially access to create these kind of more collaborative, proactive systems.
Very cool. I've been saving this question for the end, but if you could create a prescription for a happier, healthier society, what would that include?
Wow. Love and connection. It would purpose, great nutrition, cooking. I think it would change how we interact with infants and mothers, because a lot of the physiological output begins in utero. And so we need a system that actually nurtures the mother pre-conception all the way through early childhood development. Because I figured out 25 years ago that I was treating unresolved trauma, right? And we've kind of have that baked in to our society, but that trauma-ish or that neglect directly impacts the physiologic expression and health of the individual, right? You're asking really big questions, but I hope that we've got to get some foundational things right. And, like I said, I identified about 20 plus famines in our society that are resulting in poor health and obesity. And really correcting those can make a huge impact on basic function and then a long and vital life.
How many of those ideas in the book are related to relational and nutritional literacy?
I think several of them. I think we've lost a lot of ancestral knowledge around nutrition and food. I mean, 100 years ago, you never learned nutrition. You just went out to the farm and you were taught at 2 to pick eggs, right? And to weed the garden. And you were getting vitamin D and you were getting bacteria from the dirt. And you were actually, your system, your probiotic system and your nutrient system were pretty well supported. Used to be the poorest people in our society had the best diet. So I think that ancestral knowledge has gone away. And that is, part of why I started doing cooking demos again. And I have prescription pads of recipes because people have a fear of of doing that. Right. And then again, we have an illusion of connection with these new little phones at the end of our hands. We have this illusion that because we're on social media, we're connected. But in reality, the energy of being together is profound. And the illusion doesn't cut it. And we know from research that worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, worse than 9 alcoholic drinks a day, worse than obesity is being alone.
Yes.
Okay. So how do we fix that? Well, we've got to work on that as a society and as a culture. And if I can create opportunities for my community to come together, which I do, or to just think about this, that's one little way I can do it. If I'm working at a federal level with my senators to have them pay attention to this, that's another way. If I'm teaching pharmacists to look at their community and do the same, it's another way. So we do what we can.
I'm glad you brought up the idea of loneliness. That's been coming up more and more recently, especially amongst men and young men specifically, and how that's leading to a lot of the mental health crises that we're seeing today. A lot of my more recent guests have brought that up, especially about the social media. It should be called the isolation media, because it does make you feel alone. There's comparison is the thief of joy. And when you see the highlight reel of everybody's life, you will inevitably compare yourself to that highlight reel, and it will make you feel isolated and alone and like you're not enough. And that's a powerful force that can work against you. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
It's a big thing. And even what you do, I mean, I remember when my daughter was 2 or 3 or 4 and she would want to be kind of in a hole, we'd have to gently walk her through what it was to connect and reach out and risk what it is to risk with another human being. And to be honest, we don't have as many opportunities to do that. But like if you have a gym, that's a great way to build community.
And
that's one of, and like if you move into a new community and you just start showing up at a gym, you eventually are waving at people, or the coffee shop. I wrote my book at a nearby coffee shop during COVID, so, and they were rooting me on, so those things matter. Not to mention the fact that there's plenty of things that we can do to help our neighbor. There's plenty of places to volunteer. Even picking up trash can make you feel better about your existence.
Absolutely.
Excuse me.
That's part of it. Giving back is it's a free, feel good, just a feel good hormone to just go out and help. I'm part of a local disc golf group, and we've created 2 disc golf courses in our town, and just giving back to the community, such a good feeling. And then seeing it put into practice is next level. I love it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And invite people to participate, and people who, just invite them along for the journey. They don't have ask, very little of them. Often people resist engaging because they feel like they can't produce or it's out of their comfort zone. Well, I think we can give people opportunity to participate and ask very little of them. And I think that's a good first step.
Awesome. Kathy, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to, inform our listeners on? What do you have coming up? And then how can they connect with you?
Well, it's a busy season for all of us, isn't it? We've got Christmas coming up. I am going to be speaking in Dubai. I'm so excited about that. I've had the opportunity to share with some of my peers on the other side of the world. So I'm really excited about that. It's a new adventure for me, and one of my daughters is going with me. So I'm excited about that. I'm also on some Pharmacy Accreditation Council of Pharmacy Education, which I'm really proud of, because I really want to influence the education of these medical practitioners to look at this proactive preventive. What people don't realize is the first thing that doctors are supposed to help you with is lifestyle on almost all the chronic diseases. And like I had a patient say, she said, Kathy, doctors tell us to do this, but they don't actually help us do it. And so that's been the program that I've been able to so successfully help patients just navigate tackling this in their life, just like you do. But it is a little bit nuanced when they're on medication or they're already in the disease process. So, I invite you to make sure you have a relationship with a pharmacist. And it may not be the one at the chains because they're not really engaged for that. But we are out there. And I'm working on a health network, a dispense health network of pharmacists and pharmacies that can help you navigate this. So feel free to reach out to me. drkathysays.com is my website, and I'll be happy to help in any way I can.
Love it. So I'll post that in the show notes, and I'll also post a link to your book and your TED Talk. It's very impactful. So for anybody that wants to check that out, you can check that in the show notes. Kathy, again, it's been great to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your expertise. I know this has been a valuable opportunity for my listeners, and thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, and Merry Christmas.
Same to you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest episodes, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.